Hi, this is Ed. I'm in California, and this is Hello, APAC. And this is a recording right now, a global TV talk show. And Beverly Sun, hello, welcome.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you. And meet Haishi in Japan.
Hi,
Yes, yes,
hi,
of
Beverly.
course. Um, we're all busy getting ready for Chinese New Year now.
Yes, okay. So it's the year of the snake.
Yes, and
Yes. So what does that mean? That's a positive thing, right? Not negative.
it's with the year of the snake, things should be better.
Yeah.
Um, it should be a good year, so that's what we're
Okay. Well, we all want that. That's for sure.
everybody for
Yeah.
everybody. And
Okay, good.
I see some progress globally. So there's some global settlements now in the Middle East, and hopefully we'll have a certain settlement in Russia and Ukraine. So,
And Taiwan. Yeah.
well, Taiwan will be a status quo. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Haishi, please introduce yourself. Tell us about what you do for work, what your company is.
Okay, my name is Erie Hayashi, and I work for the TokyoLeasing Corporation, renting furniture to expats who are visiting Japan.
Yeah, that's very nice. And okay, so I met your colleague in the past, and Emiko should be joining us as well, and perhaps a couple of others. But we're going to have a brief conversation. This is all about, if lucky, building international business relationships by simply having a conversation and nothing for sale. It's all just talk. And if uh, we like each other, then perhaps there's a good rapport, and that makes a foundation for trust. And if we're lucky, then we can grow from there. And so Beverly, so you've been involved in the employee relocation property business for many years. And
Correct.
has anything changed? Is it different? The people are, of course, different, but uh, has anything changed about what you do, how you do it?
I think yes, certainly. I think in any industry and in business today, every sets evolve, requirements evolve. As a result, companies need to be very responsive to changing needs. And so we look to be really on tap with changes as well as to be innovative and to, in fact, be in front of your client. So that requires, I would say, being on the ground very, very actively and having, I would say, sufficient data points of what you're doing and look to create value for clients. So I don't think any business remains static if they're going to be viable. So that's where we're coming from.
Yeah. So the way that you train people, particularly younger people in your organization, is it any different than a long time ago when you and I first met?
I think before we even speak about training people, APP really focuses, I think perhaps someone may not have had the skill set, but it looks to qualify people who I think have a certain propensity to uh, have certain skill sets that want to be supportive of people.
Yeah.
Not all professionals, this is why you have different industries, have that type of I would say interest or passion. But that's what it requires because you're really needing also to be very aware of who you are. If you're not aware of who you are, then you can't help others as well as you might.
Right. So it's the same as it was years ago. But and the people who are coming to you to be in your business, they're the same kind of mentality. It's just different generation, different influences. Iri Haishi, do you see the same thing?
Yes, the things are changing, and for younger people, tend to use more digital equipment. Like they use more SNS and they want to communicate with more in digital way. But our old people want to speak in person, but young generations are different. So we train them to use more SNS more effectively and also use a website to invite more customers. So that's getting more important.
Yeah, and we see that, of course, here in the U.S. and California particularly. So here we are, digital, and I call this my global meeting room. Now, for many years, starting in, well, a very long time ago, in 1984, I produced my first ever live event, and it was in downtown LA inside the LA Economic Development Corporation, and they were my customer, and they invited me to come and bring people to them so that they can talk about, get this, land development uh, and foreign direct investment into LA. And this goes back to 1981.
Mm.
Now, if you can imagine, that's crazy. But I'm really old, but I'm here, still here. And but the concept here is
Have
that
value, have value.
yeah, we add value. But the concept here is that people always want to be together. They always want to be in a place to exchange ideas. And here we have MichaelPiker. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here.
So I want you to meet Erie Hayashi from TokyoLease and Beverly Sun, who I think you've met before with Asia Pacific.
Yeah,
Michael, a good friend for years, is now in Tokyo with Shiseido, if I say
yeah,
that right. Yeah.
right.
And you're in charge of everything, aren't you? Just about.
Well, not quite everything, at least total reward globally.
Right. And excuse me. And under that umbrella, you have rewards, compensation, benefits, communications, of course, but also mobility. And
Right,
you yourself are a transferee.
right. Exactly. Exactly. Yes, I've done it 36 times in 9 countries.
Yes. And really. Okay, so Eri Haishi is with TokyoLease, and she's partnering with Amiko, who's not with us yet today, and who you met earlier. So TokyoLease takes care of housing, right?
Yes, actually, we're working with Emiko. She's working for the consultant Japan, and
Yeah.
she is, doing the western side of the Japan, and we are in part of the eastern part of Japan. So
Ah,
Tokyo is our territory. So if Mike is living in Tokyo, maybe we're so
Sure,
close.
sure, sure. 모처럼 다녀요. Yeah,
Right. And we
yeah.
are doing also the property services and the short term or long term. So we can, as a furniture rental company, we can supply furniture to the empty apartment and make the furnished apartment so easily. And we also
Right.
have a
Thank you.
lot of inventory for the renting apartment. And we have the home up department called Plaza Homes, which is dealing with the incoming customers looking for apartment in Tokyo or other part of Japan.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
this is all part of all Japan relocation. Yeah,
That's right.
and yeah, really nice. And I'm really honored to have you guys be my customer. So Beverly, give the audience who's out there watching this show, not just today, but in subsequent months and maybe longer, because of the distribution we have through LinkedIn and YouTube and other things. Your company, Asia Pacific, is huge. You have fingers in a lot of different places and activities, and therefore you've built up a coterie of trust. Trust is a really big thing in APAC, right?
That's right. I
Tell
think,
us more about that.
okay, I think trust is extremely important because you
Yeah.
have to earn trust. Trust doesn't come as a natural set. And with what we do, obviously we're based in Hong Kong. We run services throughout China and over the last 15 years throughout the APAC region. And I think entering new markets requires total cultural understanding of the nuances of that particular culture. For instance, if you're in Singapore, it's very different from Japan, very different from Korea, very different from Taiwan. So one should never, I would say, make assumptions about their programs and that they can be effective unless you can bridge with trust with the people with whom you're providing services or with the support system that you're working with within that particular country. Then you become a run-of-the-mill player, which was what I think is one of the disappointing aspects of outsourcing and thinking that people can handle things on their own, and because we have so much technology available to us now. I actually have a question for Mike in terms of trust. Nobody seems these days, because of I would say companies looking to provide, I would say, lesser packages and bringing in younger, very smart, bright people and limiting the types of services, support services that they offer. I always wonder how they expect their young employees to be productive in new environments to which they've never been exposed.
Great question. Yeah.
So my question is, what is the retention? And do you do any measuring in terms of productivity, let's say a year later, or do you find you have a higher turnover because there's not a match, so to speak, or the integration into the new community?
Yeah, so I know you know this, the evolution from duration-based global mobility to talent mobility, which is more strategic, and the focus to your question, which is really good, about developmental assignments or young assignees who go with less money given for the assignment. At least we found, and I've done this in 8 other companies, if you volunteer, there's actually a high net promoter score because people really want to go rather than the company telling them to go, they actually want to go. So even though they might make a less allowances received as a DSP or RMC in an assignment location, the assignees generally are quite happy, retention rate's strong, but it's for culturally similar ilk. If you go to a very radically different context, you notice, then it probably requires more substantive support in the assignment location. And we put in our policy, even for the volunteers or the young assignees, a 5 to 10 grand to give sort of a encashment to avail of that, of the likes of yourself, that you give to assignees, and that helps. But they don't always use it, but when they do use it, they like it, if that makes any sense.
So does that increase your retention rate?
Yeah, we actually haven't had a retention problem because the volunteers put their hand up, they wear a backpack and they just go. And they actually are really interested in their self-learning journey without the company telling them to go. They want to go.
So these are kids like under 30?
Yeah, under 30. I mean, all the tech companies do this really well. Yeah, so I found retention for that group actually is not an issue.
Yeah. So they don't care about moving furniture.
No, they honestly, if I look at the 4 talent types in the quadrants of talent mobility, as we all know, the cheapest category is this one. We just give them a lot of cash. They don't move furniture. They take their backpack and they just land in the new place and they get on with it.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, that's pretty smart, isn't it?
What do you consider successful retention rate? 1 year, 2 years?
For that group, clearly it's a great question. 2, 3 minimum. And if they stay and stick and then become a local hire for national, not just a assignee, then that's my true measure of success, that they stick around. And so to your point, 60, 70% retention rate would be pretty good, right? 90% would be like off the charts.
Michael, let me ask you, do you get these kids to, once they're settled in, to think about being mentors to others coming behind them?
Sure, yeah. It's ilk meets ilk in mentorship, right? So peer to peer. So if you've got younglings that go, millennials, X's, Y's, Gen Y's, they are great mentors to their peers. And say, and digital nomads, virtual assignments, they're very effective, particularly for global digital nomads
Yeah.
who want to
So,
do these quick
yeah.
assignments.
So what percentage of your people in this category we're talking about now are female?
Our D&I, I'd say very happily 60% and growing, because Shiseido has an incredibly strong D&I culture. Our executive officer is 65% are women, so I'm really proud to say that. And LGBTQ, because on that is 20% representation, even for
Well,
assignments.
that's really cool. I applaud that. So Beverly, this is this different? This profile that Mike just talked about, how different is it from 20 years ago?
Uh,
Way different, I guess.
oh, it's very different, of
Yeah.
course, because I think now you're bringing in a larger workforce with have different skills, and historically you might have only brought in executives just to create some of the culture in their new environment. So you need not only the strategic, but the culture from the company in which you're trying to develop in another country. Now, I think because we have technology that's so strongly supported, and so communications are very different. To Mike's point, I find it very interesting. Obviously, we deal with a range of assignees, and very often we'll get assignees who may not have support services, but the company that they're now moving to provide the type of destination support services. And I have to say, in because we do informal interviews when we're getting in and recipients of these types of employees, that they have weathered it in their first relocation. So when they come to us and get a little bit more support, I can see that as well as they have adjusted, I can see that there is a difference in appreciation and in getting up and running very quickly. They've already weathered it, but they've had to do it on their own. And there are, I think, puddles in that. There are always puddles, but you try to avoid them because the environments are different. They're never the same. We have one who was posted in Shanghai and then went back to the US and now very rapidly coming back. And as I listened to her experiences of how she had to weather this on her own and the types of service that we're now offering her before arrival, it's a very different.
So we're all learning, yeah, as we
So
go.
I find that support does help, however limited.
Yeah.
And the retention, by the way, another year, return. But the fact is the courage to come back and the interest to come back.
Well,
I
they're pros. It's sort of like Donald Trump coming back. But that's another story. But so Erie, let me ask you a question. Do you reach out particularly to women, the spouses or the employee direct themselves, as the case may
Are
be?
you asking that? Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Because
Erie
absolutely.
also. You reach out to these people to be a coach to help them understand how to turn on the appliance
Yeah,
or
of
what to do
course.
with the light bulb or whatever?
Of course, we do
Yeah.
support the spouses. And these days, couple are difficult. It's not a man and a female. It's sometimes the couple means two men. So that's things are getting more complicated right now. But whatever is a family, will help them. For example, the wives want to have the children to settle with the schools, and we also have the service to help finding schools. And also, if the wife want to join the community, we also can help. So there are a lot of the things we can help the spouses, and there are some programs to do that.
Yeah,
And I,
I mean that makes a family kind of an approach rather
yes,
than
yes. Not me.
business.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, you break down barriers that way. It's like giving help because you know that they're going to need it.
of course. And
Yeah,
as for the female officers, we now know that there are a lot of the female officers when high-ranking people. Then the man and the wife is working and the husband is not working. That is happening also.
that's strange, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, because you have to adjust. You have to come up with new services, and everybody is aware of what the situation is. It's just a matter of, do you address it or do you try to skirt around it? It's much better
Yeah, right.
to just address and just say, hey, this is the situation.
Yes, the situation is changing, as Mike said. We have to deal with digital nomad. They want to go to countries not for years, but for the short time. They move to the many places. And
Yeah,
they need
right.
furniture, but they don't want us to deliver and pick up. They just want to have the furnished apartment or just Airbnb. So the things are changing so fast. So now we are planning to cooperate with a company who are supplying the furnished apartment all over Japan. And now next week, we're going to have a meeting with 30 people, which are the owners of the apartment. So I asked them to furnish them to rent to the digital nomad because that's a trend.
And so you're an expert at that, not only because you know your furniture, but you know the people.
Right.
Yeah, and that's really important to be open and forthright about, very direct.
That's right.
Yeah.
If I might interject, I think inclusiveness of spouses is extremely important. In fact, one of our requirements when we do an intake, it's really an assessment. So we require that spouses be on call. And this is an extraordinarily stressful time, and
Yeah, for sure.
the employee is focused on work and looking to integrate, and they very often don't even have the time to communicate, and the needs are very different. So that assessment at the onset and inclusiveness actually does matter. For single females, I do feel that they very often may not have the support buddy system. So I think perhaps being a female myself and having gone through all the adjustments and transitions of change, we're very sensitive to that as well. And very often, I think what might be expressed on paper doesn't disclose itself unless you have a face-to-face. And that's when all of the, I would say, concerns do come up and shared. And so when, by the time they've arrived into a city, you can see there's a better alignment of spouses.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mike, let me ask you a question. Is this relo, well,
Okay.
yeah, of course it's different, but how is it different from when you were in Switzerland, when you were in London, when you were in wherever you've been? It's a lot of places.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It's a very deep question because it relates to cultural context.
Right,
So,
and people issues.
so let's take an example. So it's my fourth time in Japan, ですね.
Ah,
Shiseido's iconic 153-year-old brand like Mitsubishi, Nissan, Sony, very famous. But many of the Japanese companies, as I know Erie-san knows, look at tender loving care, literally, of sending a Japanese expat abroad, probably at a level that's higher than any other country I have lived in. So the hand-holding, the cultural context, the support ecosystem for Japanese expat schools, nantoka ne, Japanese community in Shanghai, Singapore, New York, Paris, for us, desu ne. It's a very Herculean ecosystem, rightly so, to get a Japanese family to go to another location. That's probably a little bit off the charts of what I've been used to in Switzerland, US, or I've lived in, in the UK. A little bit less holding in Switzerland, outbound, like when I was at Philip Morris or Syngenta. So the way you create the policy table is more hand-holding for Japanese outbound. For Swiss or British or American, it tends to be more core flex, a lot of self-direction, self-familiation, choose what you want to do and avail of it or not. Whereas the context here is we're going to give you a whole slew of stuff and they really avail of it. So it's a very different mindset when you move assignees.
So it's called a total care. Total care.
Literally, it's end to
Yeah.
end. It's an immersive mobility experience, literally from.
I think that's beautiful. That's really the gold standard.
Yeah, and that's the way. I mean, I've been doing this 35 years. My dad before that. This is how oil and gas, used to do it. FMCG in America. So GE, Shell, BP, and Shell still has a fantastic program. But that's it's very rare today to have this full immersive gold plate. But on the other hand, Japanese practice hasn't changed that much in 30 years.
So doesn't it make sense? The gold plate, the total care approach, the Japanese approach is actually business savvy.
Yeah, but it's costly. So I have 63, I want to have 400. Sony, Nissan, Mitsubishi right down the street in Ginza have thousands. And then the problem is my program is too expensive. So I reduce the cost, a little bit less TLC, but I want more volume, more impact. So that's my conundrum is how do I do it with tender loving care, but also not quite as expensive?
Yeah. Beverly, let me ask you a question. The Taiwan situation, not political, but business, semiconductors in particular. Um, as you know, the U.S. Chip Science Act was all about semiconductors, and the Taiwan Manufacturing Company has invested billions into the U.S., and which is wonderful, of course, long term, forever. Uh, are they bringing people over from Taiwan into the U.S.? Are they able to do that, or is it too political at this time?
I don't think so. I think certainly the US seeks expertise from Asia.
Right.
So they have the freedom of going to any market and highly desired because of the background and exposure and experience. So I don't see that as an issue in terms of Taiwan receiving employees from different countries. They are extraordinarily receptive to all cultures, to all passport holders. And in fact, we've been very involved in a project, and I don't think there's not a country that we don't have an assignee coming from. Integration, and of course, with all these countries, China is not Taiwan, Taiwan is not China culturally. And so you have to look a little bit historically at each of these countries to understand the differences in how you operate. And the whole point of it is to help assignees come to a culture that's very different from their own.
So this is not political. This is not a political show. It's business. So you just mentioned something that would really pings me about the Taiwan culture versus China. Even let's call it Shanghai, which is probably the most progressive part of China. And so, or Hong Kong, as I don't see that as China, but they do. So they Taiwan that you mentioned, the business culture is very modern, super high tech, and very, I would call it open from what I know of it.
Two things, you're talking about industry, very high tech, very progressive, modern, setting the standard globally. Then when you speak about business culture, that's a very different set.
Thank you. Please identify.
So when you speak about from our experience, by the way, it may not be universal. So we don't look to make those kinds of judgments, but I have found that it represents a very traditional manner in which to do business. Shanghai's history is quite different because all of the culture disappeared through the Cultural Revolution, whereas Taiwan is steeped very deeply in Chinese culture.
Yes.
So how you conduct business is very different in Taiwan than it is in Shanghai, than it is in Singapore, than it is in Hong Kong.
That is so fascinating. As I developed this series of Hello APAC, it's like one minute is different from the next minute. It just depends on who's involved.
I think everybody makes assumptions that if you're in Asia, because we're Chinese, that if you're in Hong Kong, it's the same as it is in Taiwan as it is in China, but it is not.
No.
Beverly, I think it's very interesting to hear that Taiwan is a more cultural background than the China, because the Japanese also use a Chinese character. But I see the Chinese character used in Taiwan is similar to Japan. But the Chinese character used in China is quite different because it's simplified. So I feel more friendly to people in Taiwan, and vice versa. Taiwanese people also like Japanese culture. So it's very natural for the Taiwanese company TSMC to have a factory in Japan, and they build the large factories. And
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
well, you see, if you look historically, the Japanese occupied Taiwan for over 30 years. As a result, the protocols, the social behaviors I find very, very Japanese. Even the food placement is very Japanese.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And social behaviors are one set. Culture is very different. So protocol behaviors are outwardly very, I find very polite, very Japanese in the sense of respect, the bowing, the protocol, politeness, very gentle. And then the business culture is very much impacted by the values of a culture.
So when we get to Seoul, um, I think of that song, the Detroit rock and roll soul man. But in Seoul, Korea, it's very American, but it's not. It's Korean and it's unique, isn't it?
Oh, it's fabulous as well. It's its own culture, right? And you have to think of Korea in the 50s, the 60s, the 80s, and how they've just catapulted forward economically
Right.
and very adaptive to Western ways.
I remember we used to print our magazine, our color glossy magazine, California Bound Relocation Guide, which is a digest of community and school information used for recruitment and stuff. So anyway, we moved from printing in LA to Hong Kong and then Shenzhen and then Seoul. And of course, we saved all this money. And I met these people in the LA Chamber of Commerce, which was just extremely the world in a capsule right there. But and I've been on travel to Seoul and Shenzhen and also Hong Kong. So I have a taste, no, and really nice memories at the time. This is going back a very long time ago. And So now have invited people from Seoul and Manila, as well as Vietnam and also Australia and New Zealand, to join us. And eventually everybody will come on the show, I'm sure. But we want to make sure that everybody's culture is represented fairly and expressively on this program. And that's why I've been saying what I've been saying. So, Mike,
And
as
I
we,
just have to thank
yes,
you, Vance, before we end this show, because I think your tenacity to bring about all our countries together,
thank you.
an educational process for all of us. So I truly think you're magic. And you
Well, I call it the global meeting room. And for 4.5 years, I've been doing Zoom things where we're approaching 1,000 broadcasts. We're not there yet. We're at number 991 or something. But uh, the fact that Michael has been on our show many times now, and you have been on, Beverly, 3 or 4 times. And we used to dance together at ERC meetings a long time ago. So, I mean, the life goes on, the beat goes on. And so we want to grow this. And, to me, it's just a lot of fun. And the fact that I could sit here at happy hour without having a glass in my hand and do business, maybe we should have a glass. I don't know. But this has really been cool. And I thank you. Please come back again. Michael, would you like to say anything in summary?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with so I've lived in Asia 14 years, lived in Shanghai, as well as Singapore and Japan. So your points on TSMC in Taiwan, absolutely going to Japan big time with a huge wafer plant, southern part of the United States. And they've tried to recruit me a couple times. So very porous, beautiful culture, but and I've worked in Lenovo, a Chinese company. Taiwanese, it's a very intense. So Japan is intense to work at, but a Taiwanese company like TSMC is a fantastic company. But their mobility deployment, they send huge volumes, sort of middle tier price point, and then they do it for a substantive setup. And then your point about Korea, obviously Shanghai versus Hong Kong, we all know this is from the 50, 60, 70 historic context and post World War II. So, coming back to Asia again to see how the history is still playing out. We still have huge amount of military bases, in Korea. We have a substantive footprint in Japan. So that plays a role here too. And so the geopolitical issues going on here are quite intense at the moment.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating reading about it from here in California, and because we're there, it's like facing,
Yeah,
and so very, very interesting to have you on the show. Thank you all. Really
Oh,
appreciate it.
before closing, could I ask something about
Yes,
what is happening in Los Angeles, the big fire? Did your friend or are you affected by the fire or is doing okay?
thank you very much. It's really tragic, and it's just amazing. Uh, I'm in San Diego on the Mexican border, which is 150 miles south of West LA. And so there's absolutely zero impact here, thankfully for this area. But it's actually amazing that the firestorms, we'll call it a firestorm, has been in 3 specific areas, none of them connected to the other.
Hmm.
Just it's just strange how all that developed. Now, it's common on the west side of LA, meaning Malibu, Pacific Palisades, um, and all these towns I just mentioned are west of Hollywood and what further west of downtown LA, which has received nothing. Nothing. Now, why we don't know. Okay, but then you go north 15, 20 miles of downtown LA into a beautiful area, Pasadena, in the foothills of the 8,000-foot mountains, okay? When the mountains have been there forever. And they've always been beautiful. But now the mountains have a bad rep because, it's hell. And it's not because of the mountains, it's because of the wind. And I'm not going to get into politics or anything like that, but the lack of smart thinking, smart preparation, not thinking from 100 years ago, which has been the problem. Okay. They just use the same old, rather than smart technology and smart planning. They got plenty of brains in that area, but for some reason it didn't connect. And now there's hell to pay. And the psychological safety, I'm not going to get dramatic here on purpose, but I am. The psychological safety factor of big government taking care of population, taking care of investments that people make, it's an empty shirt. I mean, it's just terrible. And so the psychological safety and the political impact of this tragedy is just beginning. Yeah, but there's huge area. LA, Southern California is huge area. Southern California is 5, 6, 7 counties. I don't know, but they're huge. And as I said, I'm 150 miles south, and there's zero in between. There's nothing. It's just those 3 pockets. And the problem is that the Malibu on the west side, the far west side, from the Malibu's on the ocean, and so you think the ocean's everywhere, but it's really not. It's just a Malibu, and then next to that, 20 miles or so, is the Palisades, which is just a beautiful hilly. It was. It'll grow back someday, but not in our lifetime, probably. And so there's devastation, unbelievable. And yet the land is still valuable. They don't make more land. And so it will get rebuilt. And I don't know when or how, but I'm sure it'll be a national project, not just local. But it's not for me to say. So the other fire north of Pasadena, 12, 20 miles north, this very, very close, and this is very suspicious, very, very close to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is U.S. Defense Department in spades, all about space. And the brainiest of the brainiest, California Technological, it's all right nearby the Rose Bowl football stadium. Now that was not touched, but the area that had beautiful old neighborhoods full of small homes, and in those smaller homes were a completely diverse population, meaning all colors and whatever, for generations, and it's all gone. Now, how are those people going to live somewhere else? LA is really expensive. And the people who lived in Altadena, which is that area, it is really going to be hard because everybody else's prices, guess what? Up.
Yeah.
The market is not driven by anything but emotion. And
And
how much
reading
more? Yeah.
homeowners insurance, the main players are starting to stop writing policies because it's too risky. Is that right?
They did it before the fires. They started to stop. But now it's going to become federal. And because this is not a socialistic thing. This is just taking care of people without
Yeah.
any BS. Just take care of people.
Yeah.
And they've got to create a new system, a new economic system, because the old system isn't going to work. It's not working.
I heard
And
that
Well,
in
all too
California,
often,
the prices
It's
so
tragedy that creates change.
Yeah, the necessity. So so as I mentioned, part of practically speaking, all of the rest of LA County, which is really mega, it's huge, not touched. All of Orange County, not touched. All of San Diego, not touched. And so life goes on, but not in that area, which was really pricey.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge losses. It'll all get funded. Then the U.S. government will just print more money. But talk about inflation. Yeah, you're just seeing it at the bottom now. It's going to go up.
Thank you for
So there's going to be a whole new economy.
Sorry
And
to hear that.
I don't know what's going to happen. But, any business that is like the relocation business, it's all going to become a critical national industry, not just another business. Because people in the relocation business, anything to do with people who are in a tough situation or a change situation, we're the only ones who know what to do. So get ready.
The next week, the President Trump is coming into the White House,
Yeah,
and we are so
Monday.
afraid of the big changes going to the everywhere.
Well, there's a lot of talk. We'll just see what happens, But he wrote that book, The Art of the Deal,
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Read the book because it's all about BS, and it's all about laying out a situation in front and then backing up to it later. So it's just a lot of talk. Yeah, it may happen, but it may not.
Yeah. It's like buying Greenland.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? U.S. already has a big military base there,
They
so
do. We have a huge base
it's
there.
just all BS,
Yeah.
It's Hollywood. Remember that he's Hollywood, and and anyway, just stand by and let's do business.
Thank you
Th-
very
Thank you, Erie.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Erie.
Beverly. Thank you,
much.
Mike.
Love
See ya.
I'm glad you joined.
No
All right,
worries.
have a good day.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Bye.
Peace. Thank you.